Yes, Travis. Yes.
Welcome to the House Ag and Natural Resource Budget Committee. First up today is the Department of Ag, and Luke will have a presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Luke Drury. I'm a senior fiscal analyst with Kansas Legislative Research Department, and I will be going over the Kansas Department of Agriculture's budget with you today. I would also note that Kelsey Olson, Deputy Secretary, is with us today in committee and may address the committee if you all have questions after my budget analysis. I will also note with these agencies, before we get into it too much, that I did supply a blue sheet of paper for you all. That is the State Water Plan Fund, actuals, agency requests, and then governor's recommendations. You will see through the course of this analysis that there's some transfers from the water office to various agencies, including Department of Agriculture. And that sheet there will show you recommended expenditures from the governor for each one of those individual program areas from the State Water Plan Fund, along with estimated ending balances, revenues, etc. So this is a standard budget analysis format that you all are used to seeing. Front page is a high overview of the Department of Agriculture operating expenditures and types of funding. The Kansas Department of Agriculture is responsible for implementing food safety, consumer and environmental protection, and water resource allocation programs. That includes the assurance of safe meat, milk, egg supply, safety of the food supply through inspection at food processing and retail establishments, the responsible and judicious use of pesticides and nutrients, the protection of Kansas's natural and cultivated plants, and the integrity of weighing and measuring devices in commerce, and that the waters of Kansas are put to beneficial use. Mr. Chair, I would like to begin my presentation on page 5. So starting on page 5 is a little bit more detail in regard to the expenditures and financing for the department. The table itself shows expenditures by expenditure category. That would include excuse me, Mr. Chair, I apologize.
Change out here.
I was looking at the water budget. Sorry. Thank you.
Ready? We're ready.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, on page 5 for the budget analysis for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, the top table there is a table of expenditures and financing. This gives you some more detail in regard to the category of expenditure for all operating expenditures and then aid to local units and other assistance, along with different financing. I would note that the Department of Agriculture is one of those agencies that does have multiple program areas. In addition to that, they use multiple different funding streams, including General Fund, Water Plan Fund, Economic Development Initiatives Fund, along with a litany of federal and all other special revenue funds. Beginning at the bottom of page 5 is a trend line over the last several years of state general fund expenditures for the Department of Agriculture. For the Kansas Department of Agriculture, actual SGF expenditures averaged $9.4 million from 2016 to 2022. FY 2023 actual SGF expenditures a total of $11.2 million. That is an increase. This increase is the result of the 2022 legislature approving additional positions and filling vacant positions for the agency's animal health, meat and poultry, and dam safety programs, along with salary increases that were approved for most and state employees in FY 2023. Additionally, the 2023 legislature approved additional SGF expenditures for the agency's soil health initiative and the water resource cost share program. In FY 2024, the agency requests a revised estimate with SGF expenditures totaling $13.4 million. The request includes SGF reappropriations totaling roughly $19,000 and $60,000 SGF approved by the 2022 legislature in FY 2024 for the grain warehouse program to allow the agency to decrease a proposed fee increase on licensed public grain warehouses. As we flip over to page 6, additionally, the agency submits 3 supplemental requests that total roughly $285,000 SGF in 2024. Those items are for laboratory supplies, livestock brand investigators, and funding for the pay plan shortfall, and we will discuss those in more detail in the 2024 analysis. On page 6 is an examination of state water plan fund expenditures over a period of time since 2016 for the Department of Agriculture. As noted earlier on, the water plan fund sheet that you all have there in blue will help to add a little bit more detail and context to the water plan fund expenditures. The state water plan fund is used by the Department of Agriculture for over a dozen different initiatives, and these range from aid to conservation districts to soil health. Expenditures from the water plan fund have remained relatively flat from FY 2016 through FY 2023. From FY 2016 to 23, actual expenditures from the state water plan fund averaged about $8.7 million. For 2024, the agency requests water plan fund expenditures totaling $19.8 million. That includes $6.4 million in reappropriated water plan fund monies, along with a transfer of $1.5 million water plan fund from the water office. Expenditures associated with the transfer would go to support the water reservoir protection efforts. The governor is recommending additional state water plan fund transfers from the Kansas Water Office that total $10 million in 2024. That will align with action that was taken by the State Finance Council in November of 2023. The transfers would result in increased expenditures for the Rattlesnake Creek and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge impairment and dam construction and rehabilitation. And we will talk about that a little bit more throughout the course of this budget analysis. And then on to page 7 is the beginning of the FY 2024 analysis. Beginning on the top of page 7 of the analysis, again, is a table for you all that shows the legislatively approved amount along with items that then are numbered and corresponding then with the rest of the analysis that goes through 1, 2, 3, 4 and narratives that follow. Subsequent to the 2023 session, there were several adjustments that were made to the $59.2 million appropriated to the Department of Agriculture in 24. Those adjustments do change the current year approved amount without any legislative action required, and they do include the following. There are 3 items. Item number 1, the SGF reappropriation. There's a total of about $19,000 in unspent FY 2023 SGF monies that reappropriated into FY 2024. Item number 2, state water plan fund reappropriations. The agency also reappropriated $6.4 million in unspent 2023 water plan fund monies from 23 into 24. Number 3 is 2022 House sub for Senate Bill 267. This was the 2022 legislature appropriated $60,000 SGF for FY 2024 for the agency's grain warehouse program. The funding was added to allow the agency to decrease proposed fee increase on licensed public grain warehouses. The agency then submits a revised estimate of $66.9 million. That includes $13.4 million SGF and $19.8 million water plan fund in 2024. The revised estimate is an increase of $1.3 million or 1.9% above the 24 approved budget. The majority of the expenditure increase is attributable to the transfer of the $1.5 million water plan fund in 2024. That increase is partially offset by other adjustments made by the agency. The revised estimate also includes about $285,000 SGF for the following supplemental request. Item number 4 is for laboratory supplies. The agency is requesting $150,000 SGF in 2024 for rising costs and inflation relating to expenditures for professional scientific supplies and lab consumables as we flip over to page 8. Another agency supplemental request, item number 5, livestock investigators. The agency is requesting $50,000 SGF in 24 for livestock investigators. Those expenditures are included as a contractual service expenditure, not as a salary and wage expenditure. That is because the agency indicates that these are payments that are made to the Office of the Attorney General for 2 livestock brand investigators. Item number 6 is the pay plan shortfall, and we have seen this before in committee with some of the other budgets that the committee has heard. The revised estimate includes about $85,000 SGF in 24 to account for a shortfall in the appropriations for the legislative pay plan that was enacted through the 2023 Senate Bill 25. Absent those supplemental requests, the revised estimate includes an increase of about $980,000 in base expenditures, with the significant adjustments following. Item number 7 is state water plan fund transfers. The revised estimate includes increased expenditures of $1.5 million water plan fund for Kansas water reservoir protection efforts in 2024. That increase is derived from a transfer made in addition to the appropriations from the water plan fund approved by the 2023 legislature. The transfer would come from the Kansas Water Office and show as reduced expenditures in that agency and increasing expenditures for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Those expenditures would be shown as assistance payments for agricultural conservation programs, so that I would note that that would be a net zero change, reducing expenditures in the Water Office by $1.5 million, increasing expenditures from the Kansas Department of Agriculture for $1.5 million, resulting in a net zero change in expenditures. Item number 8 are all other adjustments. I call these the sort of rats and cats of a budget. All other adjustments made by the agency total a decrease of about $487,000, all from different special revenue funds. The decrease is primarily attributable to expenditures for classified employee pay and changes to fringe benefit rates. Those decreases are partially offset by increases in expenditures for capital outlay, which would include software and trucks, and commodities that would include gas and other supplies and materials. The agency request also includes a decrease of 0.2 FTE position, and that is mainly from the Agribusiness Services Program. The governor is recommending expenditures totaling $76.9 million. That includes $13.4 million SGF and $29.8 million Water Plan Fund in 2024. The governor's recommendation is an increase of $10 million, all Water Plan Fund, or 14.9% above the agency's revised estimate. The recommendation includes 3 agency supplemental requests totaling the $285,000 roughly SGF, including the $150,000 for lab supplies, $50,000 for livestock investigators, and the $85,977 SGF for the pay plan shortfall. The governor's recommendation also includes the following adjustment: that additional state water plan fund transfers. The governor is recommending additional state water plan fund transfers from the Kansas Water Office to the Department of Agriculture, totaling $10 million in 2024. Again, that adjustment aligns with action taken by the State Finance Council on November 13, 2023. When we flip over to page 9, there are some more details. The recommendation includes a transfer of $7 million water plan fund for the Rattlesnake Creek and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge impairment, including sub-basin water resources management and water transition assistance programs, and also $3 million for dam construction and rehabilitation. That recommendation results in decreased expenditures from the Water Office totaling $10 million, while increasing expenditures from the Kansas Department of Agriculture by $10 million. So again, that is another net zero change. So that is to say that $10 million reduction within the Kansas Water Office, then completely offset by a $10 million addition in the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions or I can continue.
Do you have any questions on 24?
Would you rather have him go on or go back?
If you've got something for 24, let's do 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some notes I have here on page 1, number 2, 6.4 million in unspent state water plan funds. What can you explain why that wasn't spent and what it was exactly for? I know we've got a lot of water issues and try to track them a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, to answer that question, a lot of the times with state water plan fund monies, and the agency may be able to answer this with more specific detail, but sometimes that can be a timing issue, just depending on when applications come in for certain aid programs, conservation aid programs, when they are received versus when monies can go out the door. It is traditional for the agency to carry some reappropriations in state water plan fund over year to year, again, because of timing issues when it comes to applications.
Okay, I get that. And I agree with you. although I just don't know. I'm kind of looking at it the first time. Sorry. I missed your budget explanation the other day. So the reappropriated 6.4 million, was that out of the 35 million, 18 million? How many well, I'll ask the water office later. She can answer me later. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Representative, that would represent total water plan fund reappropriations. That would include several different line item appropriations, and I can get that detail for you. I'll just need to pull it up on my notes, or like I say, the agency may be able to answer as well.
This is an agency question. I think, let me just take a look here and see if I have any real questions for you. I think the rest of them can, thank you. I can ask the agency.
Luke, let's hit 25.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then we will go ahead and move forward to FY 2025. You can find that on page 11 of the budget analysis. Starting off on page 11, again, same standard format that you all are familiar with, and that is to say that the top table shows the agency's request without major changes, and then enhancement requests that are numbered, and all other items there are numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. And then that then corresponds with the narrative down below. The agency requests $69.2 million, and that includes $13.7 million SGF and $22.9 million Water Plan Fund for 2025. I do apologize for that typo. That should be 2025. This is an all funds increase of $2.3 million or 3.4%, and that includes an SGF increase of $290,000 roughly, or 2.2% above the FY 2024 revised estimate. The all funds increase is attributable to the agency requesting additional expenditures from the Water Plan Fund in 2025, and the SGF increase is attributable to the agency enhancement request. Those enhancement requests do total $525,000 SGF, and they include the following. Item number 1, the laboratory supplies. Similar to FY 2024, the agency is requesting $150,000 SGF in 2025 for the rising costs and inflation relating to expenditures for professional scientific supplies and lab consumables. Item number 2 is those livestock brand investigators. The agency is requesting $50,000 SGF in 2025 for livestock brand investigators. Again, those are payments that are made to the Office of the Attorney General's office and not for salaries and wages. Those are contract expenditures. Item number 3, emergency AFI shelters. The agency is requesting $50,000 general fund in 25 for animal facility investigation, AFI program. The agency indicates that the funding would be used for payments to emergency shelters that are housing seized animals. Item number 4, the emergency management program. The agency is requesting $200,000 general fund for FY 2025 for the emergency management program. The agency indicates that the funding would be used to continue preparing and planning for the threat of animal diseases. Flipping over to page 12, outbreaks. Item number 5, agency litigation. The agency is requesting $50,000 general fund in 2025 for contract attorneys to handle increased litigation costs across the agency. I would also note that this is estimated to be a one-time addition of $50,000 for to handle the one-time ongoing litigation. Item number 6, USDA feral swine. The agency is requesting $25,000 general fund for 2025 for USDA feral swine removal program. I would note that funding is received for this particular program from the federal government for the removal of feral swine. The agency indicates that the allocation that USDA provides has decreased, and therefore the $25,000 ask helps to offset that decrease in federal funding. Absent the enhancement request, the request also includes an increase of $3.1 million in base expenditures with significant adjustments as following. Item number 7, the SGF reappropriation. That $19,000 reappropriation that came from FY23 into 2024 is estimated to be spent in 24 and therefore not carried over into 2025. Same thing with item number 8. The agency's 24 revised estimate had included about $6.4 million in reappropriated monies from the Water Plan Fund. The agency estimates spending those dollars in 24 and therefore not carrying those over into 2025. Item number 9, State Water Plan Fund transfers. The agency requests increased expenditures of $9.5 million to align with transfers from the State Water Plan Fund totaling $11 million in 2025. The transfers would come from the Water Office and shows reduced expenditures in that agency and increased expenditures for the KDA. Similar to the agency's 2024 revised estimate, one transfer would support Kansas reservoir protection efforts in 25. Other transfers would support water use database modernization, irrigation technology, crop and livestock research, water resource cost share, aid to conservation districts, water transitions assistance, dam construction rehabilitation, and also stream bank stabilization. I will also note that as a part of this budget analysis in the special topics section, there's some more detail on those state water plan fund transfers and monies as a result of legislation enacted last year. Item number 10 is the local food purchase grant. Agency's FY 2024 request includes reduced expenditures from the local food purchase grant fund, totaling $2.6 million when compared to 2024. The agency is estimating expenditures relating to that federal local food purchase grant to be mostly expended in FY 2024 and will not carry forward into FY 2025. Those funds are designed to maintain and improve food and agricultural supply chain resiliency. The KDA accomplishes this through assisting in procuring and distributing local and regional foods in collaborations with local food banks. Item number 11, the federal cooperating tech partners. The agency's FY 2025 request includes increased expenditures from the Federal Cooperating Tech Partners Fund, totaling $1.9 million when compared to the 2024 revised estimate. These funds are designed to strengthen and enhance the effectiveness of the National Food Insurance Program. The governor's recommendation. The governor is recommending $70.1 million, including $14.6 million general fund and $22.9 million water plan fund for FY 2025. The governor's recommendation is an increase of $950,000, all general fund, or 1.4% above the agency's request. As we turn over to page 13, the recommendation includes agency supplemental request, again, top of page 13, totaling $475,000 general fund. That includes $150,000 for the lab supplies, $50,000 for the emergency AFI shelters, $200,000 for the emergency management program, and $50,000 for agency litigation, and $25,000 for the feral swine removal. The governor's recommendation does make a few adjustments. Item number 12, those livestock investigators. The governor does not recommend funding of $50,000 for the agency's enhancement request concerning livestock investigators for 2025. As noted during the 2024 analysis, the governor does recommend funding for that in 2024, but does not recommend funding for that in 2025. Item number 13 is the local farm to food. The governor is recommending $1 million SGF for the local farm to food program in 2025. As noted a little bit earlier in 2025, the agency estimates that most federal funds to be expended for this initiative in FY 2024 and would not carry over into 25. The governor's recommendation would apply state funding to this initiative. Again, as noted earlier, the initiative makes local foods available for local consumption by partnering with local food banks and producers. And Mr. Chair, I can continue or I can stand for questions.
Committee, do you have any questions for Luke? Representative Akala?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luke, number 3 on page 11, emergency AFI shelters. Can you give me a little more detail on what that entails? Who do they take there? Is it long term? Is it short term?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I believe I can answer the question more generally speaking, but I do think the agency would probably be able to give more detail. But essentially, that would relate to payments for shelters that would house animals seized through the program, either through neglect, different investigations and whatnot, for the amount of time I'm unsure of. But that would essentially be payments to those individuals, organizations, shelters that house those animals during that interim period.
So are these like a vendor certification shelter that they've been through some type of certification with the state to qualify for these funds?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I cannot answer that question off the top of my head, but I can look into it, or the agency may be able to answer as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Luke. You did a great job as always. Mine is on page 12, number 10. The $2.6 million for federal food purchases to donate. Where'd that program come from?
Mr. Chair, Representative, the local food purchase grant is the way that this works, in my understanding, is that the KDA will work with local producers of fresh foods. So for different tomatoes, broccolis, more like perishable items, they then partner with local food banks in the region. So as you know, most of the time food banks would have shelf stable foods or foods that don't go bad. This would then make available perishable foods by partnering with local producers in the community, then for the food bank to be able to purchase those foods from the producer and then make them available at the local food bank.
To follow up on that, Luke, on his question, would the food be coming like from farm to table or from like commercial grocery store type situations?
My understanding, Mr. Chair, is that this would not be coming from like a grocery store, that this would be coming from an actual producer in the community or close by, and then coming to the food bank. I would encourage, though, or I think the agency would probably be able to give more detail and specifics on that, but that is my understanding.
And the last on this topic, they're requesting 2.6, and the governor's recommended 1 million on the for that number 10. Are they asking for the purchase food grant of 2.6 million? And over here on the governor's recommendation, is that, are they cutting that? Is she cutting that to 1 million? Two different things.
Mr. Chair, thank you. The item number 10 is a reduction of federal funds totaling 2.6 million in 2025. The governor's recommendation would add 1 million towards that initiative, but just doing the math, 2.6 minus 1, it would still be a reduction in expenditures versus what was initially done in FY 2024, but it is for the same initiative.
Curtis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luke, do you know on page 13, I see the governor did not recommend the livestock investigators for 2025, but they are in place for 2024. Do you have any more information on that as to why that happened?
Mr. Chair and Representative, I do not have any additional information, just that it was recommended in 2024, but not being recommended for 2025.
Questions? Luke, I think we're good.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, I would just like to point out a couple other items for the committee. Again, this is a standard BA format that you all are accustomed to. I really like page 14. The top of that is a supplemental and enhancement request table. That shows the 2024 supplementals on that top, maybe third, the bottom 2/3 FY 2025 enhancements. That shows what the agency requested versus what the governor is recommending. And then, as always, the numbers then on the left-hand side of those items do correspond with narratives below. So you can read a little bit more about those, each one of those initiatives. And then I would also note for the committee on page 16, that is the special topics section of the budget analysis. Not every budget analysis does have a special topic. However, 2023 Senate Sub for House Bill 2302 did inject new monies, including 35 million SGF to the State Water Plan Fund, and intends that transfer the same amount through FY 2027. There are some more details in there regarding how much money is going into the fund, transfers out of the fund to some other funds across the state, along with the agency's 2025 request, the governor's recommended transfers in, and then governor recommended expenditures. And then also, Mr. Chair, throughout, I would also just note then throughout the rest of the budget analysis, beginning on page 18, is an examination of programs within the agency. Page 18 is a table that just simply shows top level expenditures by program. In addition to that, it shows FTE positions by program. And as you continue on through the rest of the document, there is more details on each individual agency program, including the statutory basis, the different program goals that they have, along with the financing for those programs. And Mr. Chair, I can certainly stand for more questions, or as I indicated, the agency is here as well and may be able to answer questions you all may have.
Thank you. I had a couple, but just as you got to that one, what is the, on page 18, the conservation budget jumps a bunch. What's that relate back to in the text?
Mr. Chair, absolutely, Representative. That's a very good question. That would be where some of their water plan fund monies are coming from. Let me make sure. Yes, that you will see expenditures for those water plan fund monies showing up within the conservation program, and then also you should see those as well in the water resources program as well. You will notice noticeable increases over FY 2023 actuals, and then governor recommendations for those programs.
Is there text on that
Ye-
page?
Yep, Mr. Chair, Representative, yes. On page 26 is the beginning of the conservation program.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And then that will give you some more details in regard to the different sub-programs related to there. And then in addition to that, specifically for the conservation program, those increased in estimates are for other assistance to local units in 2025. And that would be related to agricultural conservation program payments from the water plan fund that are primarily related to dam construction, rehabilitation, and irrigation technology, as well as conservation district aid. And again, that is found on page 26. And then I would also note then too, as you see on the blue page that was provided to the committee prior to meeting this morning, there's more detail there regarding each one of the state water plan fund initiatives within the Department of Agriculture. You can see actual expenditures there, the agency's request, and the governor's recommendation for spending for each one of those initiatives by initiative or by program.
Print's too little. Can't see it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Lucas. Oh, or Luke. The other question I had was, I don't know that I've seen special topics on any budget ever before. Can you relate to that?
Mr. Chair, Representative, correct. Sometimes you will not see a special topics. In particular, for this one, I felt that it'd be important to include a special topics on Senate sub for House Bill 2302 for the committee, because again, there were increases in transfers to the state water plan fund. In addition to that, during the omnibus session, during the last legislative session, an additional $18 million was appropriated to the water office as a result of that. And then you will see some of those water plan fund transfers are related to that those monies were appropriated to the water plant, to the water office, and then being transferred to other state agencies. So I think that special topics will just give you a little bit more detail into some of the nuance behind some of these transfers and funding that you're seeing within not just this agency, but the other agencies that you'll hear today and for the rest of the week.
Thank you for that very much, because I was wondering where we were going to track that. I had no idea, and I probably won't know once I read it, but I mean, these projects then are the reason for the extra money was these special projects. Thank you.
Representative Cyward.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. On page 18, and you look at actual for 2023 and the governor's recommendation 25, that's about an $18 million increase over 3 years. Is it that kind of a high percent, or?
Mr. Chair, Representative, that would be in relation to some of those new state water plan fund monies that have been approved during the last legislative session. As indicated, an additional $35 million in general fund going there, in addition to the standard revenues from pesticide fees and whatnot. The standard general fund transfer, which is the $6 million, EDI transfer of the $2 million, that just increases the amount of money being available. And then the budget then is recognizing and showing those monies being appropriated and or transferred and being spent. So that would be the lion's share of where you're seeing these increases.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, since you bring up fee funds, what is the gross fee funds a year maybe for the agriculture department? Would you have a number on that by any chance?
Mr. Chair, Representative, for the Water Plan Fund, you will see, and I do know it is a little bit smaller. I can send the PDF document out so we can zoom in on it a little bit. I tried to make it a little bit more easier to read, but you can see what those revenues and those different types of fees are to the State Water Plan Fund, generally speaking. In regard to the Department of Agriculture, they have dozens of fee funds that range from everything from eggs to laboratories to you name it. And so we do have and we track and we know how many revenues come into those funds each and every year. In order to aggregate that, I don't know off the top of my head. I could certainly run those numbers to see, but
I
like
don't
I
need
say,
a whole itemized statement of it. I just kind of a rough draft of if it's 5 million or 50. Those are the fees that on this here piece.
that would show, Mr. Chair, Representative, that would show receipts to the State Water Plan Fund specifically. Correct.
Is that fees or receipts?
Those would be fees that those are fees that would be then receipted into the fund. Correct. Correct.
All right, thank you.
Committee, any more questions for Luke? Luke, great job.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now, what we've all been kind of waiting for. Kelsey, let's talk some ag.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Kelsey Olson. I serve as the Deputy Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I'm going to try to be brief. I know we're trying to hear a lot today, but I do want to highlight a few things. So a little bit about the Kansas Department of Agriculture. We are composed of 15 separate regulatory programs that are housed within 6 different divisions of the department, each serving a various function for the agency. In some way, shape, or fashion, these affect and support farmers, ranchers, and agribusinesses and consumers on a daily basis. In addition to the testimony that we have, you will also have this packet that is has a lovely wheat field on it with a sunset. I would just point out this is a more in-depth analysis of the funds that the agency receives by program. And I would point out on the very first page to Representative Seiwert's question, how many fee funds are coming into the agency? You can see that in the very first section. We have a graph that has information in that does summarize some of our fee funds at a very, very high level. Also, you can just flip through. There's going to be a purpose as to what that program does and serves to their licensees or to the industry, as well as any of the statutes that affect that, and then a subsequent fund analysis, the budget, and our expenditures by program. In regards to, there was a question earlier about the 6.4 million carryover for FY23. As Luke did mention, it was significant for state water plan funds. But if you wanted to flip towards the conservation page, it is alphabetized, you would see the carryover specifically by line item for the conservation work that is carried out for that program. So that does not total the 6.4, but that's 5.9 of it. An additional fund could be found in water management as well as water appropriations. So just kind of a rundown as far as what that budget document provides you. I'm not going to cover some of the high level elements that Luke did for the sake of time, but I do want to focus a little bit more on our enhancement requests that the agency has put forward. As mentioned, in FY24, the governor did support our budget recommendation for our enhancement for $50,000 for the livestock investigator partnership, which we have with the Attorney General. There are 2 employees of the Attorney General's who are focused daily on responding and reacting to livestock theft. As livestock prices have continued to go up, that value of that animal, that young calf is growing, increasing, and there continues to be an increased number of thefts locally across the state. The industry finds those investigators very valuable as they can follow up and pursue those investigations accordingly. So we'd like to continue to provide support to the Attorney General as they provide support in return to the industry with additional funding. We do have a request in 24 and 25 to support our laboratory efforts. We did move the lab in 2020 to Manhattan. We have a lovely lab, but just over the years with the increased inflation, the cost of utilities continuing to be a pressure, we are unable to provide to cover that lab currently. The lab is we manage the laboratory budget internally with funding it with the fees from the programs that are utilizing the lab. So meat and poultry, food safety, pesticide and fertilizer, dairy and feed, they all have a testing component that goes along with the regulatory program. So we use fee funds from those programs to cover the cost of the lab. The lab serves a public service in ensuring that our food is safe to consume, or provide further investigation in case there might be pesticide misuse in the state. Our ask for the $150,000 is about 10% of that operating budget, and we feel like it does serve a purpose for the public service, and we would like to ask for state general fund dollars to support that facility. Feral swine management, I do want to make sure that this is noted. The 25.
Hang on one second.
Oh, certainly.
Representative.
Thank you. I think probably best to stop you a little bit as you go because I'm trying to find all these pages. The 10%, the lab, you have that in 24 and 5, right?
That's correct.
So could you go ahead and talk about the two, both years, or were you it's 300,000 altogether?
It's 300,000 altogether, 150 for adjusted 24, 150 for FY25.
So when you covered this, did you generalize that for both budgets is it the same thing for both years?
The purpose is the same, and for simplicity's sake, we went with a rounded whole number to cover a significant portion of those costs. We are continuing to have to supplement the fund, the laboratory, to cover all of our costs.
I think you kind of hinted at it, but I really haven't known what you were doing in that lab, and I live right by it. So sometime I'm going to go look. But generally what is done there, just say it again.
So it primarily provides testing for our agribusiness service regulatory program. That includes meat and poultry. So they take samples of meat that's being processed in our meat processing facilities across the state that are state licensed. Dairy and feed, all dairy products, all fluid milk gets tested, randomly sampled, whether it's from the hauler at the point on the farm. There's periodic samples that are taken. There is industrial hemp is tested and processed in the lab to support the industrial hemp program. We have pesticide and fertilizer testing in case there is a complaint raised on a misuse or misapplication of a pesticide product. We will take physical samples of the plant material and test whether or not there's a residual of a residue from a chemical or product that may have been applied. So it serves a very vast array of services.
Basically, it sounds like the things that are licensed in the state that can be tested and verified if there's complaints would go there.
Yes, as well as just a regular quality assurance testing component for
the weights and measures. Is that only grain, or what's the responsibility for your department for weights and measures?
Weights and measures is charged with ensuring that the accuracy of the devices that are dispensing a volume of something, whether that be grain, weighing scales, your fuel pumps. We are charged with overseeing that those scales and those measuring devices are accurate. So we have a laboratory we have a lab for the weights and measures where we actually will certify the weights that are used when our team goes out, when the certified companies go out to test those scales. So they will certify that a 2,000 pound weight is actually 2,000 pounds, so that when we go out to test them, it is accurate and can be verified of the consumer scale that they are testing. We have measuring devices to ensure for fluids, for fuel. They will actually use a prover to ensure that 1 gallon is 1 gallon.
Just brings to mind when you talk about the fuel pump, will we be testing the electric vehicle equipment ever? Will we be responsible to be sure that it charged to?
That is something that we are actively watching and monitoring, and as part of a conversation with the Kansas Department of Transportation, and it would be within potentially the purview of our weights and measures program to test those devices that are providing electricity for sale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I didn't mean to take us too far off track, but some of these things we see it. It may need to be another 150 and 26. So I just didn't know what it was. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, do we have any questions for Kelsey? Kelsey, while we're stopped here on page 11 of this one, as Representative Akala was brought up earlier, on your AFI shelters, do you think that's mostly small animals or large animals?
Oh, I hadn't got to talk about that yet. It is so. In regards to the funding, that would be to serve all of our licensees. So we include shelters, rescues, pet breeders, hobby breeders, um, retail establishments that might be selling cats or dogs. And the funding has been used to help support the care, the medical care, as well as the feeding of the animal if there is a licensee who needs to be, who's found to have animals that are not in a safe condition. I know that there's been some recent seizures in the state, and then specifically in this area. There are often times where an individual is not a licensee. We will sometimes assist in those seizures, but this funding would be for when the agency is initiating those seizures. So with a licensee who, when we go to do an inspection, perhaps the welfare of the animal is in jeopardy, and we feel like it is of utmost urgent care to step in and seize those animals. There is a process of which that licensee then can provide a bond to secure the retainment of their animals. Oftentimes, that individual might not be able to secure a bond to provide the money to cover those. At that point in time, once that bond, the failure to provide the bonding would come, we would then turn those animals over to the shelters. And I do want to note that the shelters volunteer to participate. If we find a licensee who, if we find animals that are in need of care, we will work with shelters to identify who has the space and who is willing voluntarily to provide services to these seized animals. We then help cover a portion of those costs. We'll negotiate that price with each shelter to ensure that the cost of care is being provided, and we use those funds in accordance to our program.
So on average, how often is that done a year? I know it's probably complaint basis driven, but some of it's probably investigative, isn't it? Reoccurring habitual people that fall into that group. Of how often do we go out and do this a year?
So there's not a standard average. We just started receiving funding again in FY23 for this activity. Years ago, prior to my time, the agency actually maintained a facility to house animals at the spur of a moment's notice. The use of it was so low, it no longer became relevant to keep that. And as time has progressed, we found this to be a good alternative. In FY23, there were 2 seizures that I'm aware of. One totaled roughly $38,000. A second one, I think it was on the second week of June. I note that simply because we were thinking about having this carryover for SGF for this purpose near the fiscal end of year. And there was a secondary seizure that needed to happen that ended up utilizing about $12,000 of that fund. So it's not something that we want to be doing routinely. However, if there is a complaint, if there is a inspection that's found to have where the lives of the animals are being threatened or in jeopardy, we want to have the ability to step in.
So in the negotiation with the humane shelters for care, that's also for care and placement, is that correct?
It would just be for care. So once it would just be for medical care and the cost of living expenses for that animal. Ideally, it's for that interim period as to whether or not that licensee is able to provide that bond to secure their animals. If they can secure that bond, when they can prove to us that they can meet the licensing requirements, we would turn those animals back over to that licensee.
If they cannot, then they'll fall under the ownership of the Humane Society?
The shelters, whether
Shelter.
they may be they may be private, they may be publicly owned, we would then turn those animals to them, and then they can sell them, disperse them how they see fit according to their shelter policy.
What's the percentage of animals or percentage of cases where animals do not get reclaimed by the owners?
In the two previous situations that that I noted for FY23, neither of those licensees were able to provide that bond, and so those animals were then forfeited to the shelters.
And then when you say the price is negotiated, is there a standard for the shelters that is negotiated, or is it just open negotiation?
We have tried to establish a constant and steady rate. So far we've been able to work through that with the shelters to have a constant amount per animal per day that we've established. I leave it vague and open because as times change, we might need to look at adjusting that. But it's a dialogue that we've tried to set a reasonable standard for.
Do you ever get in a situation where there is no money available to negotiate for a situation where they need to be housed? And then what do we do if there's not?
We've not been faced with that yet, but that is something that we've talked about. If whether or not there's space allowed. So far, the industry has been great to work with when we make a call and say there's 30 dogs or there's a mixture of cats and dogs. It's often multiple shelters who are able to provide spaces because whether you may or may not be familiar, shelters are being impacted quite immensely right now. And so someone might only have 2 or 3, maybe 4 spaces. Someone else might have 1. So we work with a plethora of various shelters across the state to provide that care.
Mr. Chairman, when would be the appropriate time if I wanted to make an amendment to this?
When we work it. I don't think we're gonna have time to work it today, but get it ready, and we'll put it on when we work it.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make a comment. I'm looking at an amendment for this, just so the governing body knows, is that I know humane shelters across the country, especially in Kansas, are struggling. They're also struggling with donations and contributions. And I don't see a lot, and this is just my common sense point of view of it, I don't see a lot of people that are in violation that get the pets taken, that get these animals taken away, of getting them back. So they end up in the humane or in the humane shelters. So I'm looking at maybe a recommendation of taking that 50,000 to 75,000 only to be used for the negotiation of placement of those animals within humane shelters. So just that'll be an amendment I'll look at tomorrow. I still want to think about it, but just so everybody kind of knows. Thank you.
May I add one clarifying piece? So I do want to be clear that the 50,000 would be in addition to the 50,000 we already received for this activity. So we would be looking at having on an annual basis $100,000 to support those efforts. I just want to provide the utmost clarity there.
I'd like to make it very clear that I understand that, but being that they don't have enough information or numbers to determine what the impact is or how many, I think that 25,000 more to this line item isn't going to hurt it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to key off what the previous representative was speaking about, it's kind of a passion of mine as well. We have a huge rescue group in Kansas City, and I know, you think agriculture and we're thinking the state of Kansas, and most of the time I'm thinking, large animals, farm animals, but in our urban cities, we have kind of a different issue. And as much as I like to take care of things, when we have these issues, I would like for us to think a little more proactive in that one of the major issues from students in Wyandotte County when I visit the schools, I say, what makes you afraid to walk to school? Because so many of them don't walk. And it's because of loose dogs. They're afraid of loose dogs because so many of them have been chased and bitten, etc. But how do we take care of that problem? Taking care of it after we find abused animals is really not going to ever take care of the problem. But how do we take care of the problem as far as having so many unwanted animals and then creating such a community problem? And I just can't even imagine the amount of resources that our city spends, not only just with the volunteers, but just our city resources as well. And we did get to be a no-kill shelter, which I love that. And but it takes a lot of work. So do we ever look in Department of Agriculture at ways of addressing the overpopulation of particularly small animals, like aggressive spay and neutering, or any kind of, education or increased penalties for people who aren't taking care of their animals?
Before you go on with this. So like in Shawnee County, there are officers in the sheriff department to take care of that. In the county, there is no leash law. But in your cities, you should be able to talk to somebody. I'm sure you've got somebody in your city that should handle that, I would think. I mean, there's only so much Kelsey can do. And I don't know, but it's a problem, but you get to where you're in a jurisdictional problem. I mean, a state, county, city, and I know it's probably a problem, but in the county there doesn't seem to those seem to take care of themselves.
So if I may respond, our animal facility inspection program has definitions as to what would be required to be a licensee. And so I very much hear what you're saying, and there is a city local ordinance items. In respect to our program specifically, we do, there are requirements that when like animals are brought in and resent out like through the shelters, that they are spayed and neutered so that we are helping to control those populations down the road. But there's only certain areas in which it falls under the animal facility inspection program's jurisdiction. But we do try to provide resources and support when we can and when it flows within our purview.
Do we have funding for spay and neutering then? Do we provide any funding for spay and neutering?
No, that is done by those rescues and shelters when they bring animals in. That's part of our guidelines, that any animal that goes through there is supposed to meet those requirements.
And I think they're pretty good about that. I think they are pretty aggressive, but we still have so many animals. There's too many. Like, we don't need more.
So on the same page, number 2. So as I mentioned earlier, I know someone south of Wamego lost 17 head of Wagyu heifers, and it's pretty desolate out there. And you see the signs, KLA will give you $500, da 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 da. But as of so far, there's been no restitution that I know of, and I'm sure you know more cattle rustling than I do. But it seems that let's just say that happens. The sheriff hears about it. What is the procedure that it gets to the attorney general, and what do they do to help you solve these problems?
Certainly. So, those two brand investigators that are housed with the Attorney General work very closely with local law enforcement. They're out there regularly trying to introduce themselves, ensuring that those local agents are familiar and know that they are a resource to them. So, oftentimes, a producer will contact their local law enforcement to notify of the theft. And ideally, that local law enforcement will be contacting our brand investigators. At that time, the brand investigators have a variety of tools within their resources to conduct that investigation, and it is often a lengthy process because and we won't sometimes it does proceed in legal matters and legal actions, and we know the legal process can be time consuming, so they do can conduct their investigations. There's often many ongoing investigations. I know when I set in a report last fall with the brand investigators, I believe that they had 19 ongoing investigations at that point in time, and I think they could share that 3 had come to some sort of resolution. Sometimes those animals are found. Sometimes they are not found. Sometimes they were never there to begin with, but they conduct those investigations to try to assess what is happening in conjunction with that local law enforcement. We get reports on the other end. We are not often involved in the process until a report comes out.
Yes, thank you. So that was my question was, what is the role of KDA in the investigator? So you just provide the resource, provide the pay, provide the outline guidelines.
So it is in our statutes under the animal health commissioner to have brand investigators. It was a decision several years ago prior to this administration to partner with the attorney general. The attorney general does have a few more resources available to them in terms of legal resources that would not be something that KDA would often maintain. And so we work with them and we've continued that. This $50,000 is to be an addition to the $190,000 we currently have in that partnership with the Attorney General.
Thank you very much. That's really good to understand.
Continue, Kelsey.
Okay. I believe we haven't spoken about feral swine. I'd like to touch on our feral swine enhancement request. So we do, again, this is another partnership that we have. This is with USDA Wildlife Services, and we currently provide $175,000 to the USDA Wildlife Services to help trap, control, and prevent the infestation of feral swine in the state of Kansas. This has been a very successful program. And honestly, Kansas is looked to as a leader when it comes to feral swine management. We have, as many agencies have over the years, experienced an inflation of cost of goods and a shrinking budget. We would like to increase the amount that we are providing wildlife services to continue to support the work that they do in collaboration with the Department of Ag regarding feral swine. Yes, sir.
So, when you have time, when you want to share it or not, I'd like a little bit of history of where in the state, I guess you would say, number of critters terminated, because you always hear we saw some here, we saw some there, but I just want to see what I'd like to see for the money invested. If you do need more, that's great, but it'd be nice to know, or if we're not spending 175,000 for 6 wild pigs at Burlingame or something, you know what I'm saying? So just a little history when you get time.
Certainly. We do get an annual report from Wildlife Services. I'd be happy to provide that to you. I can email it to your committee assistant to share out. Moving on to the $200,000 request for our emergency management program. One of the elements that falls under the Division of Animal Health is the state's emergency preparedness regarding foreign animal diseases. We do a various array of efforts to support this preparedness program. One of them includes a multiple day exercise that we do every December where the agency stands up an incident management team and we respond and react as if there is an outbreak at a Kansas farmer's facility or a Kansas, dairy producer or whoever's volunteering to play. This will include about 300 different people who come from varying agencies across the state. Our federal partners come as well, and we've often had multiple states that have come and participated in as well to observe what we do and how we react and respond. One of the key things that we do outside of the exercise is work with producers to establish a secure, we call them secure food supplies. This secure food supply plan, excuse me. Part of that plan is focused on ensuring biosecurity measures would be taken if need be. So when we're talking about foreign animal diseases, it's the spread of the virus that is the real threat that we want to mitigate and stop as soon as possible. So that virus might be spread by vehicles coming and going off of a farm, through the employees who might be interacting from one pen of animals to the next, or moving from different facility to facility if they happen to be a feed provider. So we sat down with the producer, talk about what they do today, what are their daily practices, and if there's a need to increase those biosecurity measures, what measures could they take to prevent that they might become infected?
So if your producers have a bio plan in place, does that kind of ensure them maybe a little bit of financial assistance for the animals that are put down?
So it's not tied to the indemnity of an animal. If that would be the case, it would be to help them get back to business as soon as possible while operating under a potential outbreak is really what we are after. I'll keep going. We've touched a little bit on the AFI facility emergency aid. Lastly, or not lastly, but second to last is $50,000 for our legal services support. We continue to receive a number of lawsuits outside of our Office of Administration hearing process. And at times it has been valuable to be able to secure counsel for subject matter experts or additional advice or expertise as we are dealing with those lawsuits outside of our agency's normal reactions. So we're just asking for some additional funds to be able to provide some retainers if need be. And lastly, the Farm to Food Bank program. The governor did put $1 million in the Farm to Food Bank into our budget. This conceptually was developed because of the immense support and the popularity of the federal program of the local food purchase assistance program that we administered, that we call it the LFPA. That is what we received $2.5 million for, where we partnered with the food banks to provide so that they would have funds to purchase food from local producers. This is KDA screened those producers to ensure that they met the food safety requirements, the safe handling requirements, any of the requirements that might be required of their product that they were providing. And then we passed the approved list to the food banks. At that time, the food banks then entered into their own contracts with those producers to buy food, purchase food from them using the dollars that we had with the federal grant. This program, we've stood it up through the federal program. We believe it's worked well, and the governor had interest in providing additional funds to see it live past the lifetime of the federal grant dollars that were provided. So I'll pause there. I know we also have another conferee on this subject, so I'm happy to answer any questions, but would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This isn't really a question. It's a comment about the emergency management program, the exercise that KDA does every December, 3-day deal. I've been fortunate to attend a couple of those, and it's fascinating to watch how that department will react in the event of an animal disease outbreak. So I would very much be in favor of keeping those funds in place. Thank you.
On the food $1 million food program, do you think that the local Kansas farmers, you think this program is growing? Because it's probably more like perishables, like what, melons, sweet corn, and vegetables, maybe.
We had a variety of producers who applied, everything from honey producers to fruits and vegetable producers, as well as some livestock owners who were having direct to consumer sales of their products. So it's really a vast array of all kinds of food products that are grown, raised, or produced in the state of Kansas.
You, Kelsey, is this a source of funding for uh, the farmers market when someone comes around and picks up all the stuff that's left over and gives them a little chit for or some kind of money? Um, that's going on in Manhattan, and I don't know if it's through our local um, food pantry or if it's through this program. I don't know where it came from, but they pick up the the tomatoes that can't make it one more time back home, and they take them to distribution to a food bank, and then the farmer is paid something for that through some kind of a coupon or something.
I'm not familiar with
Okay.
that is a slightly different program, and I'm not familiar with that one. But this is a contract, oftentimes where the producer will specifically grow additional product for the food banks to purchase. So
Okay.
it is a new market outlet, supplementally to whatever they might be doing to promote and sell their product on a
Okay,
regular
so
basis.
you're actually paying people to grow it for that purpose. That's wonderful. Thank you, Kelsey.
So, any other questions? Kelsey, are you wrapped up?
I'm wrapped up. If there's no further questions, thank you
The
for.
question I would have is for other state agencies that are incapable of trying to do one of these, so you can follow things. Would you have any money in your budget for me to make you a list of some other people that come to this committee?
If there would be, if you so felt the desire to add some finances for us to help and work with those other agents, we'd be glad to take that task. I am very proud of the team who, it is a team that puts forward these documents. And so I appreciate your compliment.
What I like about it, sometimes it's too much, but it's there and you can go find it. Representative Everett?
Since you bring it up, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you because I enjoy this. I love the way you've laid this out. And sometimes it's too much information that I don't want to know. But, you know, every time I've dealt with you, worked with you, you always do a great job of providing facts, not attacks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. So, next, we've got the hearing on the KDHE. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Karen, I'm sorry. You've got the mic.
I'm Karen Siebert, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you for the Farm Food Bank program today. I'm advocacy and public policy advisor. Advocacy and public policy advisor for Harvesters, the Community Food Network. But I'm here today on behalf of the 3 food banks that together serve all of Kansas's 105 counties. That's Harvesters, the Kansas Food Bank based in Wichita, and then Second Harvest Community Food Bank. Last year, our food banks distributed more than 46 million pounds of food to a network of 555 charitable food pantries serving those in need in Kansas. Those are from our smallest rural communities to major metropolitan areas. A lot of those found in your own communities and your church food pantries and community centers as well. As we all know, Kansas farmers feed the world. The Farm to Food Bank program will help them feed their neighbors. The funding you're considering today will provide resources through KDA to Kansas's food banks to acquire Kansas grown and raised food, fruits, vegetables, dairy, meat, and eggs for distribution to food insecure families around the state. This is an investment in local and regional food production that will improve our state's self-sufficiency. We all experienced the food supply chain challenges during COVID and realized how dependent we've become on national and multinational food production. Helping build the capacity of our local non-traditional crop farmers while at the same time providing much needed nutritious Kansas grown food to those in need is a win-win. And thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the program you might have.
Betty, do you have any questions? You move an amazing amount of food, and it's just hard to believe you can pull that all off. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh wait, Joe, Representative Cyrus got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, again, since you bring it up. What do you see in the increase, let's say the last 5 years, on people coming to the food bank to get stuff?
We do see an increase, and particularly over COVID, as you know. The particular challenge we're seeing right now is a lot of the additional resources that were provided during COVID. In addition to food resources, there was also things like the child tax credit and housing support have fallen away. And so people don't have that anymore. At the same time, we're seeing significant increases in food inflation. Food costs increased from February 2020, which is pretty much the beginning of COVID, through May of 2023, increased 23.5%. And wages increased approximately 17% during that same time frame. So people are getting farther and farther behind, particularly on their food budget. And why it's a particular challenge for our low-income families is that those in the bottom 20% of the income brackets spend about 30% of their income on food, just because that, by the nature of what they have to get by day to day. The upper 20% only spends 8% of their budget on food. So I think a lot of people now are really seeing, they go to the grocery store and they say, I used to be able to get 3 bags of groceries, and now I can only get 2. And even upper income folks are really seeing that it's a significant pressure for those low income folks. They're really struggling. No, because we actually didn't see the same increases in food insecurity in this last during COVID that we saw in the recession in 2008, because I think people saw how people struggled in 2008. It took a long time to get out of that. So the federal government stepped in during COVID and provided a lot of support through those. So we didn't see that increase, but now too, we aren't seeing a real decrease either in the need. It's been pretty level as those benefits have gone away, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Representative Garber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming. I read somewhere where the Harvesters building down here is going to be in the way of the new interstate. What are the plans to fix that?
Interstate's going right through our building. So we looked high and low for a different facility here in Topeka. We were not able to find one. We have some really specific needs unique to us. We need volume, not instead of square feet, we need cubic feet. And with transportation and roads and that kind of thing for our trucks, we weren't able to find anything. We did secure a facility in Lawrence, the old Rudder organ facility, pipe organs. They need a lot of volume. So we are working on that space now, adding refrigerator and freezer space, and we're supposed to move in there this spring. So hopefully we'll be out before the road comes through and have no disruption in service, hopefully.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That I get calls from the most are probably the elderly. Mm-hmm. They have, some of them have Meals on Wheels, mm-hmm. But you'll be standing in line at one of the grocery stores, and for some reason they'll turn around and say they wrote a check for $60. They have nothing. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of the retirees in Kansas, which is about a third of Kansas, they're focused right now trying to pay taxes and buy groceries, and it's tough on them right now.
Yeah. Inflation really hits those people on fixed incomes a lot. So we are seeing that increase in our pantries, and I anticipate it will get worse with our aging population.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And since you bring that up,
we're good.
A couple of years ago, we had a couple of bills that was real hard on farmers markets and allowing people to come in and sell their stuff reasonably cheap and things like that. Has that slacked off any? Because that was a big help for a lot of people that could go to the farmers markets and buy stuff. And some of them, after the end of the day, there was stuff left, they would give it away. Mm-hmm. But it shut a lot of people down from going in our neighborhood. And, have you seen any decline in that too?
We do work a lot with the farmers market. I'm not sure about those kinds of trends. We work with our own local farmers markets. At the end of the day, if they do have produce left over, we send our trucks out to get that produce so we can get that into our system to get that out to folks in need. And then the program I believe that Representative Carlin may have been referring to about the token is a program called Double Up Food Box, and that's a philanthropically funded program where people who have SNAP benefits, if they go to the farmers market and use those SNAP benefits to buy local produce, the philanthropic organization will double the amount that they spend. So if you buy fruits and vegetables, $10 worth of fruits and vegetables with your SNAP benefits, you'll get an additional $10 in benefits to spend at the local farmers market. And because of the issue with the SNAP cards and the point of sale stuff, they have to use a token so that they get this token that they give to the farmer. And then the farmer at the end of the day turns that token in and says, these were for SNAP benefits, and they get reimbursed. And I know that they're trying to get word out about that program. It's always a challenge to do that, but I know they're working really hard to do that. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add just comment. So I volunteer monthly at the Salvation Army for food distribution. And I can tell you, 3 years ago, I hardly seen anybody I knew. And now I see a lot of people that I know. I know that in the purchase of groceries over the last couple years, and it's just my wife and I and grandkids that come over and visit, that's sugar items. But I've noticed the bill went from like $350, $360 to almost $150 more, and we buy basically some of the same things, and so it tells you how cost is going up and becoming more unaffordable for people that are elderly and non-fixed incomes. And I sure hate to see you go to Lawrence for that waste of taxpayer dollars of that highway that's going through there. I think it's ridiculous, and I would never have supported it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
All right, thank you.
That'll close the hearing, and now we're going to open the budget hearing on KDHE. Luke, we're ready for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Luke Drury, Senior Fiscal Analyst with Kansas Legislative Research Department. I will be going over the Division of Environment budget here. You will notice that this looks a little bit different than the other budgets that you have seen. That is because that while the Division of Environment is heard in this committee, and we have just the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, for budgetary purposes, the Division of Health and the Division of Environment are split. And so therefore, in this particular committee, we hear the Division of Environment, while Health and Human Services hears the Division of Health. I would also note then that Leo Henning, the Deputy Secretary of Environment, is here with this committee today and may be able to answer any questions that you all may have. So, as noted before, this is a little bit different than what we are used to seeing. At the top of the page, though, we still see an examination of overall Division of Environment expenditures from FY 2016 to FY 2025, along with some statutory bases there and program goals for the Division of Environment. Then there is some more detail in regard to the different bureaus that make up the Division of Environment, including Waste Management, Air, and Water, along with environmental remediation and environmental field services. But Mr. Chair, I will just start on page 46 of this sheet for my analysis. The agency is estimating Division of Environment revised 24 expenditures of $78 million. That includes $2.4 million SGF. That's an all funds decrease of $71.1 million, or 47.7% below the 2024 approved amount. The agency's revised estimate includes the following adjustments: the State Water Plan Fund reappropriation. The agency's estimate does include Water Plan Fund reappropriations that total $1.5 million. The pay plan shortfall, I will note that this is an agency supplemental, and this is a normal, or I shouldn't say normal, but this is something that the committee has seen in other budgets that have been heard in this committee. The revised estimate does include about $20,000 general fund in 2024 to account for the shortfall in the appropriations of the legislative pay plan for the 2023 Senate Bill 25. The next item is the abandoned mine land reclamation funds. The agency's FY 2024 revised estimate includes an increase of $2.4 million. That is all from federal funds for contractual services and the remediation program to aid in, and we'll flip over to page 47, restoration of land and water resources that have been degraded by the adverse effects of coal mining practices. The next item is the labs moving to the Public Health Division. The Division of Environment's FY 2024 revised estimate includes a reduction of $83 million. That is from all funding sources. That includes $2.2 million from the general fund and a reduction of 107 FTE positions. That is for the Health and Environment Laboratories. As a part of an agency-wide reorganization effort, the agency's lab program will now be reflected in the Division of Public Health. That reorganization effort includes all expenditures for the labs. That would include $30.9 million in federal ARPA monies for the building of the new lab facilities. So I would just note there that at the beginning of or just the overview of 2024, we talked about it being a reduction of $71.1 million. And then also some FTEs. That is by and large the lion's share of where that is. And then we'll talk a little bit more about how those reductions are offset by some of the other moves requested by the agency. Waste management, the agency's FY 2024 revised estimate includes an increase of $725,000 about, all from special revenue funds, and an increase of 4.4 FTE positions for the Bureau of Waste Management in 24. That increase is mostly attributable to base salary and wage expenditures, along with fringe benefit rates. And that's because the agency's request does include hiring an additional environmental specialist and temporary unclassified positions. For air quality, the agency's 24 revised estimate includes an increase of $328,000, all from special revenue funds. And again, this is on page 47, air quality, and an increase of 2 FTE positions for the Bureau of Air Quality in 2024. The increase is attributable, similar to waste management, and you will notice throughout the rest of these estimates by the agency, they all follow a similar vein or similar line, that those are attributable to salary and wage expenditures along with fringe benefit rates, because the agency is requesting to hire 2 additional engineering associates. The increase is also attributable to estimates for contractual services, increased estimates for contractual services. Specifically, the agency is estimating higher expenditures for temporary staffing that would include attorney and lawyer fees in 2024. For water, the agency's FY 2024 revised estimate includes an increase of $1.1 million. That also includes about $27,000 SGF and an increase of 5.68 FTE positions for the Bureau of Water in FY 2024. The increase is mostly attributable to those base salary and wage expenditures, again, along with fringe benefit rates, because the agency's request does include hiring additional staff. That would include an additional environmental scientist, professional engineer, geology associate, database manager, and engineering technician. For remediation, the agency's FY 2024 revised estimate includes an increase of about $692,000. That would include about $93,000 general fund and an increase of 4.5 FTE positions for environmental remediation in the current year. Again, similar with the rest of these items, that is attributable to those base salary and wage expenditures along with fringe benefit rates. That is because the agency is requesting to hire additional staff. And that would include an environmental compliance and regulatory specialists, along with an environmental data management specialist and other administrative positions. For field services, the agency's 24 revised estimate includes an increase of about $155,000. That includes $45,000 SGF and an increase of 0.5 FTE positions for the field services program or division bureau in 2024. The increase is mostly attributable to contractual services, as specifically agency is estimating increased expenditures for other professional fees. For the small town infrastructure program, the agency's 25 revised estimate includes an increase of $5 million, all from federal funds for the small town infrastructure program. That provides grants to support technical assistance and drinking water and sewer system upgrades for towns with less than, and I do believe there's a typo there that should say 1,000 in population as opposed to 500. Those funds, which were included in the $374 million in Discretionary American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, that were approved by the State Finance Council on December 21, 2022. A total of $10 million ARPA was awarded to the agency. $5 million of that is reflected here in FY 2024. We will flip over then to page 48 with a discussion on agency FTEs. The agency's revised estimate includes 398.2 FTE positions for the Division of Environment. That is a decrease of 89.8 FTE positions below the approved number. That decrease is attributable to the agency reorganizing health and environment laboratories to the Division of Public Health. As was noted in that move from labs from environment to health, we see that reduction in FTE positions. That is partially offset by the division requesting additional 17.18, 17.2 FTE position across those other Division of Environment program areas. The governor does concur with the agency's 2024 revised estimate for the Division of Environment. She also recommends transfers from the Kansas Water Office totaling $5.8 million for water quality initiatives. The governor is recommending $1.5 million for contamination remediation, $1 million for total maximum daily load initiatives, $50,000 for surface water trash removal, and $3.2 million for small town infrastructure support. Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions, or I can move forward to FY 2025.
Committee, does anybody have questions for 2024 with Luke? I guess we're ready for 25, Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For FY 2025, the agency is requesting Division of Environment expenditures totaling $89.4 million. That includes $12.5 million general fund. That is an all funds increase of $11.5 million or 14.7% above the 2024 revised estimate. The agency's adjustment includes the following major adjustments. I would note the first item here is livestock waste management. I will note that this is an agency enhancement request. The agency is requesting $210,000 general fund for livestock waste management for 2025. The agency is indicating that the funding would allow the agency to hire additional contract engineers and add additional contract clerical services. Contract engineers would be used to review proposed plans for confined animal feeding operations. Contracted clerical services would be used to assist the agency in converting paper documentation into electronic formats. The next item, small town infrastructure assistance. Again, this is an agency enhancement request, and I would also note that the agency does have $5 million in ARPA for 2024 for this particular program, $5 million ARPA for 2025 for this particular program. So the agency's request of the $10 million SGF would be in addition to those ARPA monies already allocated to the agency. Again, these monies would go to support the technical assistance and drinking water and sewer system upgrades for towns with a population of, and again, I do believe there's a typo there, that should be 1,000. Towns with a population of less than 1,000 for FY 2025. The agency also notes that towns with that population are most likely to have drinking water and sewer systems fall out of compliance with state and federal requirements or fail to correct public health issues. The agency notes that funding would grant relief to those towns having issues arising from deteriorated drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. For contamination remediation, the agency is requesting $500,000 in water plan fund transfers from the water office for contamination remediation in 2025. That transfer would be in addition to the requested appropriation of $1.1 million, and that would result in estimated expenditures of $1.6 million for contamination remediation in 2025. The agency indicates that funds would be used for emergency response activities where there is an immediate danger to human health or environment, and to provide alternative water supplies to citizens with impacted drinking water. The next item is the Local Environmental Protection Program. The agency is requesting $400,000 in water plan fund transfers from the Kansas Water Office for local environmental protection program cost for 2025. That transfer would be in addition to the appropriation totaling $250,000 and result in estimated expenditures of $650,000 from the State Water Plan Fund for local environmental protection program costs in 2025. The agency is indicating the funding would allow the state to provide financial resources to counties for on-site wastewater system upgrades and replacements, as well as resources for private water well testing. The agency further indicates that funding for the program had not been appropriated since FY 2012, and the 2023 legislature did appropriate funding for the program in 2024. The agency's request for 2025 then would continue that request for appropriations for the program in 2025. Surface water trash removal. The agency is requesting $50,000 in water plan fund transfers from the water office for stream trash removal for 2025. That transfer would be the only funding source for this particular line item in 2025 because the agency's request does not include a direct appropriation for that purpose. The agency indicates that funding would go towards a pilot effort to remove and keep trash out of Kansas rivers. We turn over then to page 49. At the top of page 49 is the Ark River ditch lining. The agency is requesting $1 million in state water plan fund transfers, again from the Kansas Water Office, for drinking water protection in 2025. That transfer would be in addition to the requested appropriation of $800,000 and result in estimated expenditures totaling $1.8 million for drinking water protection in 2025. The agency is indicating this funding specifically would allow the agency to line approximately 20 miles of Amazon ditch in Kearney and Finney counties. The agency is indicating that the source of pollutants found in the Arkansas River emanate from Colorado, and those pollutants are interacting with traditionally good quality groundwater in Kansas. These pollutants contaminating traditionally good quality groundwater is the result of leakage from irrigation ditches that distribute river water to upland areas. The funding would allow the agency to line or seal a portion of those ditches in an attempt to limit the amount of contaminated river water that could leak into existing groundwater. And Mr. Chair, I would note, I know that there are others that call it the Arkansas River. I do have some family from Arkansas, so it's just how I say Arkansas River. The aquifer recharge basins, the next item. The agency is requesting $500,000 in state water plan fund transfers from the Kansas Water Office for the aquifer recharge basins for FY 2025. The transfer would be the only funding for the program in 2025 because the agency's request does not include a direct appropriation for that purpose. The agency indicates that funding would go towards initiatives that encourage the infiltration and percolation of high quality rainwater into poor quality groundwater through the development of artificial playas, upland detention terraces, and depressions with Hickenbottom injection wells. The agency indicates that the initiative is a long-range one and it will require multiple years of study. The next item is the groundwater quality monitoring. The agency is requesting $1.1 million in water plan fund transfers from the Kansas Water Office for total maximum daily load initiatives and use attainability analysis for 2025. That transfer would again be in addition to an appropriation request totaling $391,000, resulting in net expenditures for the purpose of $1.5 million for maximum daily load initiatives. The agency indicates the funding would reestablish an ambient groundwater quality monitoring program in the state. The agency indicates that the groundwater quality monitoring program will, item number 1, collect baseline data to identify areas of the state where groundwater quality is already at risk or exceeding health standards and allow detection of future deterioration. And item 2, create a public data platform that integrates groundwater quality data across agencies and links with existing Kansas Geological Survey water databases. The next item is RAPS effectiveness. The agency is requesting $200,000 in water plan fund transfers from the Kansas Water Office for watershed restoration and protection strategies, RAPS, for 2025. That transfer would be in addition to the requested appropriation of $1 million and result in estimated expenditures of $1.2 million for RAPS for 2025. The agency indicates that the funding would focus outsourced monitoring efforts to collect water quality data in an intensive manner and to better evaluate the true impact of watershed practices investments that are currently implemented. The agency's 2025 request also includes 398.2 FTE positions for the Division of Environment. That is equal to the agency's revised estimate in 2024. The governor does concur with the agency's request for 2025. And then, Mr. Chair, I would also note that on the back page here, and I know that it is a little bit out of order, but it does say page 27 at the bottom, is again a special topics section specifically for 2023 Senate Sub for House Bill 2302. Again, similar with the Department of Agriculture, you will also find the same special topics in the Kansas Water Office budget analysis as well. It gives a brief overview of what 2302 did. In addition to that, it does show for FY 2025, the governor recommended appropriation for each one of those line items, along with the governor's recommendation for transfers in for each one of those line items, and then how that would result in governor recommendation for net expenditures for each one of those line items in fiscal year 2025. Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions, or as noted earlier, Leo Henning, Deputy Secretary of Environment, is here with us in committee today.
Committee, do you have any questions for
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Leo?
Good afternoon, Chairman Corbett, committee members. Sure. Okay.
Right, where you're talking about, when on the stuff that Luke was talking about, it'd be his page 49.
What he said.
I'm there.
So on the RAPS effectiveness and monitoring, says the Office for the Watershed Restoration. Are you referring to in this project watershed dams throughout Kansas? It'd be under RAPS and effectiveness and monitoring.
I see that, but where in the paragraph are you talking about?
One, two, it'd be third line down where it says the Water Office for Watershed Restoration and Transfer would be an additional $1 million.
All right. Right now, our current funding from the state water plan to KDHE is $1 million. What's in addition is an additional $200,000 to monitor the effectiveness of what we are implementing in the field. Right now, the things that they implement in the field on farm fields are riparian corridor establishment, stream bank stabilization, buffer strips, things like that, things that would try to keep the soil in the field and not into the river.
This would not be anywhere in comparison to the bill they heard in the water referencing kind of small dams and throughout the state of Kansas. That's something different, right?
This is to just measure the effectiveness of those best management plans or practices that we put on those fields. Are they really working? Are they really cutting the sediment load to the stream down? So it's kind of a verification of the activities that we complete on the fields to make sure that they are being as effective as we hope they are.
One other one we talked about earlier last time was from Representative Akala. He had some questions about your $50,000 for river cleanup.
Right, the trash removal pilot project, yes.
That's just where on the river? Is it just the Kaw River, or all rivers? Or
it is not limited to just the Kaw, but our initial discussions have been with the city of Topeka and the city of Lawrence. But I know that city of Wichita has already asked to be considered also.
Representative Akala.
Mr. Chair, I did visit with someone from the department, and they had been working with the city, and I visited with the city also. And I'd like to I'll make that amendment tomorrow, that allocation is for along the Kaw in Shawnee County and the Shunga, where we've seen the transient camps that have created tons of trash. If anybody has any questions, if you drive down River Road right now at the foot of the Topeka Boulevard, just go over the Topeka Boulevard Bridge. There's tons of trash laying on state property along that area. And I don't know why the Corps doesn't have some skin in the game neither, but that'll be my amendment when we work this bill.
That's the only two things that struck me, Leo. So
All right.
I guess pretend like I didn't ask anything. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I do have a presentation that I'm going to go through very quickly. You should have it in your package. It looks kind of like this, but it's in color. Mine's black and white. And I am going to go through this fairly quickly because I know time is of essence. And a previous chair told me it's too long. So, so I will get through it quickly. So are we up? Okay, let's go to the second slide. That's just an organizational chart of KDHE. As the big three at the bottom is the Division of Public Health, Division of Environment, and Division of Healthcare Finance, which is Medicaid. The other ones are support functions, but that gives you an idea of how we are broken up. Next slide is our mission. I'm sorry, one back. Is our mission, which is to protect and improve the health and environment for all Kansans. And the way the Division of Environment does that is we try to protect the air that you breathe, the water that you drink, and the soil that you live on. Next slide. These are the 5 bureaus within the Division of Environment. Bureau of Environment Remediation at the top. That is the state cleanup programs and redevelopment programs. It's somewhat equivalent to the EPA Superfund type activities. The next one is the Bureau of Water. You can see all the programs within it, and they enact the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. The Bureau of Environmental Field Services has the livestock or feedlot program, the non-point source program, and then all the district offices around the state in which our inspectors reside. Bureau of Waste Management is our solid waste and hazardous waste programs. And then the Bureau of Air does all the Clean Air Act work. KDHE Division of Environment is a highly regulatory agency. We receive applications from industry. We review and approve those applications. We issue permits. We look at compliance issues with those permits and provide technical assistance. And we perform enforcement if needed. Next slide. This is an idea of where our money comes from. Trust funds at the top left is trust funds like the Petroleum Storage Tank Fund and the Dry Cleaning Trust Funds. Those go for cleaning up sites and permitting underground storage tank sites. Federal dollars, 26 million. That comes from mostly the EPA, but we do receive some money from Department of Interior for coal mining and the Corps of Engineers to work on federal facilities around the state. SGF for the entire division is 2.4 million. And just a note, that's only 2.3% of our entire budget. State water plan, which is what we've been covering quite a bit already. And then fee funds, which is fees for applications and air quality fee, solid waste tipping fees. Yeah, those are just the fees that we collect to run those programs. Next slide. You can get an idea of where the money goes out. Most of it, 39% of it, goes for salary and wages. Another 38% goes out as contractual services, where we are hiring companies or cities or some contractual agreement to perform services for us. Consumables, equipment, very less than 1%. And then aid to locals, that is just for, again, city pass-through type dollars. The next slide is for 25. The only thing I want to point out on this slide is that the SGF went from 2 million to 12 million. And that is because of the enhancements that the governor is put into as recommended in her budget. So the big jump there is the 10 million, and that's for the small town infrastructure dollars. And then there's really no huge differences between the expenditures of 24 and 25. So we'll keep moving. Next. Okay, so we're going to talk about the supplemental requests. KDHE did receive $5.8 million of state water plan dollars that was transferred to us from the state water plan. We gave you a briefing on this, I think it was a couple weeks ago. KDHE did receive an additional 5.8 million. 3.2 was for small town infrastructure, 1.5 million for contaminated sites, 1 million for establishing the groundwater quality network in the state, and then the 50,000 that we've already talked about is for the stream trash. Next slide. FY25. We have 2 enhancement requests, the $10 million for the small town infrastructure, and I'll talk about that later. And then the 210,000 for the livestock permitting facility program. That chart there shows you what our backlog was a few years ago. At the height of 21, we had quite a few permits and applications backlog from the livestock feeding organizations. That's when we hired our outside engineer. And since then, we have been able to drive our backlog down to around 30 or less than 30 now. The reason that we have to hire a contract engineer is because we can't hire a professional engineer at our currently approved salary rate. So without that, without hiring that contractor, we would not have made much of a dent in this backlog, and that wasn't acceptable. So.
Thank you. I was doing 2 things. So you're hiring a contracted engineer, but it is a professional engineer.
Yes.
But we're just not going to put it on staff.
What?
It's not going to be a staff person, just a.
No, it is
okay,
an
thank you.
outside contractor.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So let's go to the next page, which we're going to talk about the $10 million enhancement that in our budget for the small town infrastructure. It is a continuing funding of the small town drinking water treatment systems and wastewater treatment systems. It is for communities less than 1,000, and it is targeted to communities with compliance issues. I will spend a little bit more time on that. I'm going to keep moving though. All right. So next one is in 25, our enhancements. We did have $1 million for the Upper Arc Ditch Lining Project. These are all state water plan projects. Aquifer Recharge Pilot Project of $500,000. Groundwater Quality Monitoring Network of a little over $1 million. Watershed Best Practices, that's at $200,000 that we were talking about earlier to enhance our monitoring to make sure that those BMPs are working. And then the 50,000 for waste trash out of the streams. So I'm going to go to accomplishments next. We received $10 million of ARPA money for those small town infrastructure improvements. We put that out for that $10 million out for applications, and we received $85 million worth of requests. So we were able to put out 18 grants to small communities to improve their drinking water and wastewater treatment plants. There are a couple here, other accomplishments. I'll just mention the response to the Keystone Pipeline up north, where we had the large oil spill from the pipeline. That is now completely done. And we have been able to put out $1.1 million of funding to municipalities, schools, private industry, nonprofits for solid waste recycling and composting, waste tire reuse, household hazardous waste collections. So next slide. I want to go back to the 10 million that we received. Out of the 10 million we received, these are the communities that did receive part of that $10 million ARPA money to improve their wastewater and drinking water supplies. The next page, next slide, is an itemized list. If you want to see exactly what city received and how much they received and the population of that city. As you can see, our applications were open to communities of 1,000, but we do try to we do give preference to those communities of less than 500, and I think that's where the mix-up in the presentation by Mr. Drury came. But it is open to 1,000. But this will give you an idea of what communities in your areas may have received some of that funding. The next slide is just a slide of the cities that did make application for that $10 million that we had out. So you can see that we were only able to fulfill 18 of those requests, and that's an idea of where the need is around the state. Next slide, because we are always asked about bill money and how we're using bill money to help communities. So far, since December of 23, we have put out a total of 89 loans. Now, these are loans. That's the difference. The first one was a grant. These are loans that we are giving out to communities to improve their drinking water and wastewater systems. As of December 23, we put out 89 projects for a total of $334 million, of which $67 million will be forgiven for those communities. So what the important part here is, although the first 10 million are grants to help the small communities, our communities are borrowing money to improve their infrastructure. And we'll go on to the next slide. These are the communities that have received loans from KDHE. It gives you an idea of where those communities are that have taken loans for us. The next 4 pages are the different parts of the state. We broke it up into quadrants. So the first one is Northwest Kansas. On that slide, you'll see the city that asked for the loan, how much the loan amount was for, how much of that loan was forgiven, and then what the project is. So if you're interested in your area, you can flip to your area and you can see which cities and what was forgiven. So with that, gets me to the challenges, which was a very last slide. All right. Employee recruitment and retention, that's still our number one problem. We have a hard time recruiting, especially the professional geologists, engineers. I can't tell you when the last time we were able to hire a professional engineer or geologist. So what we have to do is we have to try to recruit newly graduated students from colleges and bring them in and train them, and hopefully they stay. They know a little bit. And the next one is the small.
Since he's talking, I wonder what's the method or formula that you use for how much money is forgiven on your loans? Is that come with the BIL? I mean, I don't know.
The money that we receive from EPA for the BIL loans has requirements attached to it. It comes into us by several different pots of money, and each one has a different requirement on loan forgiveness and how much and things like that.
So it's established by the federal government.
Yes.
That's given us the money to grant.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then small town drinking water compliance. The grants will help us tremendously work our way with those small towns to get them back into compliance. There's a new set of chemicals out there called PFAS that will be regulated and by the EPA with creating new standards. That will be a new challenge for us. Nitrates in groundwater is just we are still working with small communities that have high nitrates in their drinking water and trying to drive those concentrations down by helping with BMPs in the well field area. And then the last one is recruiting operators for our drinking water and wastewater plants, having operators that are certified to run those plants. So I have blazed through that. I know we are getting close to leaving, but thank you for your time, and I'll stand for questions. So, committee, tomorrow we're going to do water, state fair. Leo, we'll get you scheduled.
You'll get something from these guys on Thursday, maybe.
Be back here on Thursday?
Water tomorrow, or tomorrow. One look, fireworks, you water. Okay. We'll leave it up to stay. Yeah. No further business, everybody's running late. Thanks for hanging around, guys. I'm sorry water we never got to you. Thanks for coming. Question.